Welcome to Community Kitchen. We've got a great lineup this morning. We're going to be talking a little bit later to Professor Ben Oldroyd about bees, just following up from our discussion last week. We're going to talk about the Mount Mee Fair coming up on the 14th July. And a little bit closer to home, of course, the medieval festival at the Abbey's coming up this weekend. We're going to be talking to Brad Gills, who's someone very involved with medieval cooking, so I'm sure we're going to hear some pointers on that. I think we'll go to our song. We'll be coming back with our first guest, Ben Oldroyd. And we're back with Community Kitchen. While we're waiting to contact our first guest, I thought I'd just share something. We've find these little cookbooks around the place. This is a one-pot feed the lot. Works out apparently to $3.45 a serve, which probably isn't that expensive when you think about it. It's low fat, it's cost effective, and everyone's going to like it. And it's just basically doing a whole lot of chicken drumsticks in the pan with your roast veggies. So basically you're only having a preparation time of 10 minutes. You're cooking for 1 hour 10. You're using a clove of garlic, a tablespoon of oregano, a quarter of a cup of chopped parsley, a zest of 1 lemon, 8 to 10 chicken legs. You can trim those up if you don't really want to use the skin and the fat, but personally I think that gives us that beautiful flavour. 8 small shallots, a couple of potatoes, and about 500 grams of butternut pumpkin cut into chunks. You're just preheating the oven to 180. In a large baking dish, you're combining all the goodies, and with a tablespoon of olive oil just to moisten. Mix until combined. Put the dish into the oven and cover with foil and bake for 20 minutes. After it's baked for that 20 minutes, remove the foil. Turn the chicken and veggies just to sort of bring the roasted ones from the bottom to the top, and bake for a further 50 minutes without the cover. How simple is that? You can have this time of year when it's cold, the children are around, you get that fantastic vegetable joining in with the flavour of the chicken, and just a few little things. I think lemon and chicken go so well together, and how easy it is to actually create something like that. I think that's part of winter, isn't it, when there's so many wonderful, beautiful winter produce around. And once again we talk about eating seasonally, because there seems to be so many good reasons for us to do that, not only for the taste, but of course you get the warming veggies which help with this time of year when everybody seems to be either getting a cold or flu or something like that, and nothing's nicer than having that warm, fantastic food on the plate. I think we'll just go to a quick song now and we'll come back with our first guest. Excellent. So welcome to our Community Kitchen. It's been, you've been doing some fantastic research on bees.
Well, I don't know if it's fantastic, but yes, that's what I work on, bees.
Well, I think it is fantastic because of all the things we're reading about. There seems to be a lot of discussion groups, especially in Queensland, where we're talking with the different beekeepers here who have been, trying to build up their hives and things like that. And now we're sort of finding that, I guess we were wondering whether it was after the flood that our bees had diminished a little bit. And now you're talking about is it the varroa mite? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So can you just explain to our listeners, what have you actually been working on, and what is the varroa mite?
Okay, starting with the second question, the varroa mite is a sesame seed size little mite, and the life cycle briefly is that a fertilized female runs into a brood cell just before it's capped, a honeybee brood cell, and then she hides in the corner until the larva starts to pupate, and then she drills a little hole in the side of the pupae, and the first egg she lays is unfertilized and it produces a male, and then she lays some subsequent eggs, and these things just feed on the blood coming out of this hole that the mother mite keeps open. And then the first developing male mates with his sisters, and then the mites emerge, about 6 or 7 of them, when the bee hatches. And the bee is severely debilitated by the blood sucking that's gone on, and she is very susceptible to viruses. So once you've got a lot of these mites in your colony, the colony is going to die pretty quickly. So what we don't have this mite in this country. It's the last country in the world that doesn't have the mite. And so, well, the expectation is that it will be here very shortly. They're in New Guinea, they're in New Zealand, they're in Indonesia, they're all around us, and they're actually in the Torres Strait as well. So we have to make preparations, and one of the preparations we need to make is to determine whether or not we've got any genetic resistance to these mites. So that's what I've been working on, to see whether or not we have any endemic resistance in Australia.
When you talk about them sort of not being in our area here, what's probably the most classic way for these mites to actually come into Australia?
There's any number of routes. It could come in via a beekeeper importing a queen bee from overseas. Somebody did actually do that not so long ago, but was picked up at Sydney Airport. Another route would be a swarm on a boat or in a container. That would be the two main routes.
It's interesting, isn't it? And you'll have to correct me on this if I'm wrong, but they were saying here a little while ago, we had a beekeeper on, and he was talking about that we have another little virus that seems to be covering the beehives and not letting the bee actually travel in. Is that this is a whole different virus to the varroa mite, no doubt?
I'm not sure what your... Well, the varroa mite is not a virus, but it does make viruses come to the side. If you're being chewed on, you're more susceptible to viruses. I think that's the simplest way to put it. Well, there are a number of diseases of honeybees, most of which we have in Australia. They vary from viruses to bacteria to protozoas, the normal gambit of things which affect creatures. The ones that we don't have are the Tropilelaps mite, which is in Asia, and a rather nasty one called acarine, or Acarapis woodi, which lives in the breathing holes of the bees. And if you get these things, they're really not good.
It sounds scary, really, doesn't it, when you think about the huge amount of production we have here, like our agricultural land that we have in Australia. It's going to have quite an effect on that if we actually do have something like that enter our shores.
Sure. The varroa mite, when it arrives in a country, basically eliminates all feral colonies. So you won't find bees in trees anymore. And given that in lots of agricultural areas we'll have 10, 20, 30 feral colonies per square kilometre doing pollination, it is of concern that pollination won't be done anymore. So commercially what will happen is that growers like apple orchardists, etc., who tended to rely on feral bees, they will now have to hire bees from beekeepers, and that will put up the cost of production, etc., etc. So it is of considerable concern, yeah.
So what can the average person do to actually help the bee colonies, I guess? People say it's not, like, let me go back on that. A lot of times you think, I should just go and buy myself a couple of hives and put them around your properties and things like that. But you have to actually maintain these things, don't you? Yeah,
it's like any other livestock. It'll sort of look after itself most of the time, but every now and then you have to intervene to help them out. Look, if you're a commercial producer of fruit or some vegetables or whatever, you do need to pay attention to pollination, and generally speaking, we recommend 2 or 3 colonies per square kilometre, which is per hectare, which is quite a lot. So, if you're in commercial production, that's what you've got to do. Otherwise, then for domestic people, maybe a hive would be nice, but you should do it because you want to keep bees, not because you want to do your pollination, I suppose.
I think that's the amazing thing. I mean, I live on quite extensive land, and yet you don't... Once upon a time, people said you'd come across swarms of bees. It's not like we're finding them all of the time, and yet a lot of people say, well, if there's areas doing commercial spraying or doing this, then of course it's going to have an effect. but you do find your little native bees everywhere. Is this mite going to affect the little tiny native bee also?
No, that's a very fortunate thing. They will have no effect on our native solitary and social bees. Not at all.
That's great. That's something to look forward to, then, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think when you read something like this, that the research confirms that there's going to be devastating effects on our Aussie bees, a lot of people do have that adrenaline and sort of start to worry about it because over time we've got different crops that are coming into being that you think, should we be having introduced crops from other areas because it's not native to your land or your soil. So, of course, once you start to think about the varroa mite, my mind often thinks about all the fact that we're importing so many different timbers and stuff like that. Can the varroa mite actually come into Australia that way?
No, it needs to be on a bee. So it would only come in with live bees. Another pest that's been introduced into Australia recently is the small hive beetle. So that started in Sydney in year 2000, probably associated with the Olympics, people think, because lots of stuff was being brought in. And that has been quite, I won't say devastating, but certainly to some people it's been devastating. So this is a beetle that flies into colonies and lays eggs in the honey mainly, and it produces this nasty, greasy slime that is associated with the larva that attracts more beetles, and wheat colonies in particular are just killed by this. So in areas where it's humid and sandy soils, that's where these beetles really get going. So around Sydney, they're just awful. And I believe in your area, they're pretty bad too. They may have contributed to the reduction in feral bees that you see around the place.
And that's what people have been talking about. I mean, you have the conversation with old timers, and they'll say, when we were mustering, we'd sort of go through our paddocks and we'd come across swarms of bees, and we just haven't seen that. And I think that's sort of, different chats. People have start to get a little bit paranoid about what's going to happen in the future. But then, of course, you have something like the varroa mite, and you think, well, really, that's going to have quite an effect. But you're going to actually try and... Is it right that you'll create a bee that will maybe be able to fight back with this varroa mite?
One step back. What the purpose of our research was to take the best bees that we have in Australia from all over the country, from Perth to Queensland, and I took 170 of them over to Kansas in the United States, and then we established them in a commercial apiary there. So you introduce the queen into the American hive, and a little while later, of course, it's the Australian workers that take over the colony. And we also put in there some queens of American stock that have been exposed to the varroa mite for 20, 30 years now, and just saw how the Australian bees faced up to the mite, and it wasn't pretty. The Australian queens produced colonies that were killed within 3 months by the varroa mite. So we have this is what you'd expect and predict. We have no resistance here. Also say that our bees were the same as the stock standard American stock. So the only ones that survived this trial were the ones that have been specifically selected to avoid or to be resistant to varroa. And that's what you want, of course. You don't want to be putting chemicals in your colonies to resist or to kill the varroa. You want the bees to be able to take care of themselves.
So this is going to be something that will happen over time in the next few years, that introduction of these particularly changed bees, I guess.
The resistant ones.
Yes.
Well, there's a difficulty with that. At the moment, it's illegal to import bees from the United States because of the Africanized bee. So in the southern United States, there are these what so-called killer bees, which are spread out from South America. And these are things we really don't want. They're highly aggressive and they don't make much honey. So the AQUIS, or what is it now, Biosecurity Australia, have quite rightly said, well, until you've got a decent genetic test that can tell us whether 99.99% security that the imported bee does not have these genes, then you're not allowed to import them. So one thing we will be working on over the next 3 years is to develop genetic testing for this Africanization.
Must be very patient, you people.
I don't know. I think we do. We get enough rewards sufficiently frequently that we can keep going.
Oh, well, I'm very thankful that you're like that, because when you talk to different researchers and they'll say, oh, look, in 5 years we sort of think that we're going to have this covered, and a lot of the times you think, oh, it must be very patient people.
Well, you have more than one project at a time, so hopefully
I'm sure you do.
Various things will come off.
That's fantastic. Look, thank you very much for joining us this morning, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of beekeepers out there who will be listening for future news.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you. Good morning now.
Okay, bye-bye.
And we've been talking to Professor Ben Oldroyd, and it's nice to know that we've got things happening. And of course, so many things, when you think of that little tiny bee, so many things can change our lives by not respecting and looking after that. I think we might go to our sponsors. We'll be back very shortly. Fairs happening around Caboolture at the moment. Of course, we've got the Medieval Fair at the Abbey this weekend. And next weekend we have the Mount Mead Fair. And we've got Keith Marsh on the line. Good morning, Keith. How are you?
Good morning. Very good, thank you.
Bit cold up there in the mountains this morning?
A little chilly, but I think that's everywhere.
I took a photo of the front of our ute when I was leaving this morning, and I had about an eighth of an inch of ice. And I thought, now this is definitely winter.
That certainly is.
You've got your Mount Mead Fair coming up on the 14th of July.
That's correct, yes.
Great fundraiser, lots of things happening up there.
Yeah, it's actually a country fair and auction, and we do it every year. And yeah, it's to raise money mainly for the chaplains, school chaplains, mission groups like Beautiful Gate and Kenya and stuff like that. So it's an exciting time where we can try and bring the community together. Obviously, it's under the banner of Mountaintop Community Church. But yeah, we have a great time and a lot of people come, so it's really good.
You were saying when I was talking to you the other day that you get a lot of visitors. You've got some car clubs coming up there.
That's correct. There's a Vintage Car Club, the Renault Club. There's actually a few car clubs coming up, and if anyone else would like to come along and be involved, that'd be fantastic. We've got prizes for the most unique car and all that sort of thing. We've got a pampered pet competition with all the kids to bring their pets, and there's obviously a number of different prizes to be won there as well.
I think also the wonderful thing you were saying, there's a lot of good produce there for people to buy. There's morning tea available, and of course you've got your auction going, which is just such a fun thing.
Oh yeah, it's the auction's amazing. Actually, we get Mike Wheeler. He's the local auctioneer down in Woodford. He comes up, and it's actually a tremendous day. We have everything from cars to I think motorbikes this year as well, and furniture, farm goods, antiques, you name it, it's going to be there. Even a rugby league signed by the Broncos. We've got a fight at Ocean View Winery, for example, with a meal, all that sort of thing. So it's a great opportunity to come along and be involved.
I think it's excellent also when you live in an area like we do, and you've got so many communities around the centre of our huge shire it is now, and it's amazing when you think of how many people are included in the Moreton Bay region. It's great to see that you've got that nice little community effect where people actually do roll up their sleeves, get involved, and get there with whatever they can to just give that nice support.
Oh, yeah. Our community up there, Mount Mead, is amazing. People up there are truly amazing. And see, with this auction, it's so good, the fact that even you don't have to, you can donate gear if you wish, or if you've got something that you'd like to sell, you can certainly sell in the auction, and then there's just a commission on that sale. So if anyone wants to be involved in that whatsoever, please you can give me a ring or come up on the Saturday at say 9 o'clock, and because it starts at 11:30. The reason we did that is because, a lot of kids play their sport in the morning.
Exactly.
And so we started a little bit later. We've got the Ramblers coming as well with the skydivers, and there's going to be an auction of a tandem jump with them. I don't know if I'd auction that, but
no, I don't know whether my hand would be going up for that one.
Me either. But we have even a boxing tent afterwards, where there's a demonstration and a boxing, and it's going to be a great day.
I loved the thing. I think what caught mine was a country fair. I think, that time where people actually were able to go along and have some good yummy things to eat, buy some local produce, and have a bit of a wander in the sun.
Oh, tremendous it is. We've got so many markets coming up, and like you said, the food is amazing, absolutely amazing. There's coffee, teas, Devonshire teas, you name it, it's going to be there. Fairy floss, the old homemade fairy floss on the stick, that sort of stuff. So
I think kids still love that, but I mean, now that you're older, you taste it and you think, how did I eat that when I was a child? Because it's so different. So
my
Keith,
wife loved it.
So what number would you like to give people in case they do actually want to have a stall or get involved or do whatever? What was the best number for contact?
My number is the best. It's a mobile. You can get me at any time. It's 0434 277 434.
Well, we offer you the best wishes for your day, and we hope it's a great success on the 14th of July.
Thank you very, very much. We appreciate the time on the radio.
Thank you, Keith. Goodbye now.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
We'll go to a song, be back very shortly. And welcome back, of course. And we have our next guest online, a medieval cook. Good morning, Brad. How are you? Good morning, Brad. How are you?
Very good. Can you hear me there?
I can hear you now. The Abbey's festival's happening this weekend. 22,000 people to visit there. And there's lots of different events. But I think my interest today is to talk to you about medieval cooking, something that apparently you enjoy to do.
Yes, very much.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like just going through, and we were talking earlier, of all the different things you Google, when you think about medieval cooking, you sort of think, there's going to be all these different interesting meals, but it's really getting back to basics, isn't it?
For a lot of the people who eat in the Middle Ages, food is survival. So many of the recipes we see from the Middle Ages are about honest living, to food from the source straight onto the table. But there are also a whole lot of medicinal uses of food and also entertainment uses of food.
I remember seeing this article one day about the fact that, pies once upon a time were more of a celebration of thing, where they, the old story of the blackbirds in the pie. They actually had live birds in a pie shell, didn't they?
Yes, that was a theatrical aspect of food service. But pie started out as mini refrigerators. When you had meat, which was expensive, the best way to preserve it was cook it and then keep the air out of it, because the air has all the bugs that turn meat into nasty stuff. So if you cook it inside a pastry shell and then ensure there's no air inside, possibly with a drizzling nice butter over the top of it, then food can last for a really long time. When once that had been part of the cultural memory, then people started to play with it. They started to use it for nice presentation with little pastry stuff on the outside, shapes. And then people started thinking, I can use this as a vehicle to present theatre. So they actually did have pies which were cooked and then opened up and live birds would fly out, much to the amusement of the guests.
I can imagine that would be incredible. When you think about the kitchens of that time, it would have been a smoky, hazy thing, because everything would have been open, wouldn't it? Big open areas of big hearths to be able to take the big cauldrons and things like that.
The best reconstructed kitchen I've been to is at Hampton Court in the UK. And they had lines of stations, open fires, sure, wood fires, but often going up through tiny little individually chimneyed cooking spaces, so that individual chefs could cook a particular dish over a particular heat that was necessary for that particular meal.
Oh, so it was broken up into areas, the whole big kitchen?
Yeah, sure. But they also were able to cook large roasts over big open fires and also enormous kettles. And they had one gigantic kettle which was permanently set into the wall, So it's impossible to tip out. You put stuff into it, put some stuff out of it, but it's stood over the fire forever. And that's the sort of cooking that wouldn't be accepted in a modern restaurant for the food safety issues.
No, I know. And also it's a little bit of worry, isn't it, when, years ago people had the wood stove and they just kept taking it on and off and reboiling this thing, and you think, I hope it's going to be all right at the end of the day. But,
sure.
But I'm sure it would have been.
Yeah, if you keep the food up to a certain temperature, then the bugs get killed at that temperature. So it's only a problem when it dips down to room temperature and then gets reheated and then back down and then reheated. That'll hurt you.
I think one of the things that I was amazed at just reading about this medieval food is in the foodstuffs there were some really suspicious foods too, like the potato and tomato and banana. They were something that were probably, they wouldn't have been a regular thing to that area. So they were actually treated with this little bit of a, wariness of whether or not they should be used in their food.
Very much. We look at a lot of foods as being traditional, but foods were discovered in the world and brought into kitchens around the world at different times. And the potato is a good example. The first recipe for a potato I can recall is in 1597, and it's a pot roast potato with salt and vinegar. It's really quite tasty, but the potato plant itself is related to nightshades. So the people who looked at the potato and thought this could be a food, they recognised that it could be a poison as well. So potato and tomato, similar families, had a great deal of suspicion. Tomato especially because a lot of plates that food was served on were metal, and the tomatoes are very acid.
Uh-huh.
The early tomatoes are very much the yellow globes, the pomodoro, and they're quite an acid little fruit. When they were discovered by the Spanish and brought into the Mediterranean in the late 1500s, they're mostly grown for ornamental purposes. There are examples of them being served in salads, but people are very suspicious about it. It's an entirely alien plant. If I brought a plant back from Mars and served it to you, you would be right to be worried. You'd be right to be suspicious.
I think that's amazing. One particular area I was reading. Now we see Maggie Beer on the television. She's always talking about her verjuice. Well, verjuice was used in the Middle Ages all the time.
Very much.
And, people talk now about, this is a new thing. But a lot of the foods that were back then are things like almonds. They were just used so prolifically as thickeners and things like that, and almond milk. And yet we sort of got rid of these things, and now they're slowly coming back into our diet. But as you said, they were such good medicinal foods.
Well, almond milk is critical in the Middle Ages, especially for the religious issue, and that is not so much about the almond itself, but on many days during the year, it was considered not good to eat meat. And there are still people today who follow that in their lives, and that's cool. So on those non-meat days, people still wanted to have milk. And the best way to make non-meat milk is with almonds. If you blanch about a cup of almonds and then chop them up very finely, pour in about 3 cups of water, hot water, and then let it steep in about half a day, you'll have a very lovely white milk that's full of protein. It's very good for you. But it's non-dairy. It's completely non-dairy and won't give you any problems with your religious observance if you're a traditional Catholic in the 1400s. And that's a great way to serve it. So the trade in almonds was very important in the Middle Ages. So was the trade in salt fish. If you can't have red meat on those days, you're still able to eat fish. So in the North Sea, the trades to farm cod, for example, and then salt them and then transport the salted fish around the Middle Ages, well, very important. But today, we go down to the supermarket. We don't need to worry about salt fish. You can only find salt fish in places like little Asian supermarkets. It's a very rare commodity, but it's a very old traditional food.
The Italians still like it.
Yes, they do.
Now, Brad, if you were going to cook a meal, if I said to you, I'd like you to cook something for me that's a medieval dish, something that I could eat for my dinner, what would you cook?
Right now,
Yeah.
I'd cook you Zuppa al Pavese in 1525. Francois, the King of France, and he's like the French version of Henry VIII.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to conquer Italy. It's his lifetime ambition, but he fails in a gigantic battle in Pavia. And he's captured by the Holy Roman Emperor's troops, and they take him to a farmhouse. They're going to treat him right, but they've got to feed him something. It's the end of the battle. It's cataclysmic, and all that's there is a little farmer guy, and they say to him, "Cook him some food." So he makes soup. He's got chicken soup on the pot, a clear chicken stock. He's got some bread. He's got some cheese and some eggs. So he toasts the bread, puts it in a bowl, cracks an egg on the top, throws in some Parmesan cheese, some parsley, and then pours over the boiling hot, clear chicken stock. And 5 minutes later, the egg has poached up, and that's the traditional, so the story goes, beginning of Zuppa al Pavese. It's a really classic, tasty, peasant food, good, honest food that's just come straight from the ground, straight onto your plate.
That sounds delicious.
Really simple, really clean.
And a lot of foods are like that. I mean, the one thing that interesting, I was talking to a woman a little time ago on the show, and she was saying that a lot of people now don't have enough fermented food in their diet to have that balance, for your gut and all this sort of thing. But in that time, they would have, wouldn't they? Because they were fermenting and holding food and storing food. So you would have got that real balance of all different types of foods.
You might have heard that the bread is the stuff of life.
Mm.
Bread and beer are very similar in a lot of ways. They're both fermented through yeast, and they're a great way of preserving carbohydrates. Food is about storage of energy, and the way that you live in a precarious time when harvests might not be so cool is to have lots of wheat, which is great energy. It'll keep you alive.
Mm-hmm.
And the way to produce that is through bread and beer. And I've heard that that fermented stuff is very good for our gut.
Mm.
Other people are more expert than me, but the Middle Ages, bread and beer, crucial. Every village had a baker, every village had a brewer. And providing those objects to people was very important. Most people in the Middle Ages drank beer, not full strength, 5% or 8% beer. Normally 0.5% to 1% beer.
That's what they used to drink it all day.
Yeah, they drink it all day, 8 pints a day.
Wow.
You've no chance of getting drunk. But the important thing is the beer is safer than the water.
Ah, of course.
Because the beer has been brewed, the yeast has been in the water killing all of the other bugs. The water has been boiled to go into the beer. It's become medieval safety water. You drink beer for your health.
I think it's quite incredible when you think of the fact that, when you imagine these chefs, let's say, if someone who lived in a noble house, and different stories I've read, and just different novels and things like that, and they talk about these great banquets, but some of the things were just absolutely incredible, like some of the desserts, and they had shaved ice, and they had amazing things when you think about the fact that they've got no refrigeration, they've got no storage, and yet they really did produce some amazing meals.
And there are a lot of these meals that are recorded from the period eyewitnesses, and they're really a challenge to recreate.
Mm.
They're seeing the artistic vision and trying to recreate it is very enjoyable. But the ultimate purpose is food as theatre, to show your guests that you are wealthy, that you are powerful, and that you can afford to hire these expensive chefs who will do these wonderful things for you out of food. And you've got conspicuous consumption. You've got so much food, you can waste it. You can turn it into theatre. You can turn it into frippery. They
would have needed a lot of staff.
Yes. it's important to recognise in the Middle Ages that labour is very cheap. That skilled labour is still relatively cheap. So someone in a noble house can have a host of servants, all with particular tasks. And this means that very delicate food, very highly hand-decorated food, this is easy to turn out because you've got a big staff. It's not so easy for me to do.
No.
It's one man just turning out lots of stuff. But where you've got lots of servants, much more easy to give your food that little handcrafted detail.
Now, you had an event a few weeks ago what did you cook for something like, how many people, 200 people or something?
We had 240 people for 9 meals between Friday and Monday. And there are lots of restaurateurs who do more than that. But it was myself and my wife and another 7 or 8 volunteers and lots of helpers. Breakfasts, lunches and dinners, three feast-style dinners.
All going on the medieval style of cooking?
Yes.
So did you
as
have
part of a medieval event with lots of combat in armour and dancing and other crafts. So the food is part of the whole product.
I think it's fantastic. So you would have had whole carcasses of something or other, would you?
We often do, but we didn't on the event 3 weeks ago. We had mostly stews and salads and breads. But yes, we quite often have whole carcasses, whole beasts being roasted.
Incredible, isn't it, too? And I guess I think the thing is that when you think nowadays that you can go into any supermarket, get any combination of any sauce or whatever, you're going back to the basic food, and seasonally, no doubt, that you're incorporating in your medieval cooking style. Do you find that hard when you have to go around and buy the produce?
Well, it's just a different attitude. I think that we are very used to going to the supermarket and getting what we want when we want it. And it doesn't matter whether it's in or out of season. I want a pumpkin, I'm going to have a pumpkin, I'm going to have it now. It doesn't matter whether it's the right time for the pumpkin. But when we're doing our medieval feasts, we're very often guided by what is seasonal now. That's going to tell me what's going to be on my menu. I'm going to try and produce something that's produced in the period. So I'm looking for what's fresh. I go to the markets and see what's around, what's fresh and good. And that's going to help me decide my menus and see what's on the menu, on the plate. The freshness of the food really helps with the taste as well. I don't need to convince you that the fresher the food is, the shorter its transport time from the ground to the table, the better it's going to taste.
I think after we've finished talking to you, there's going to be a few people who are going to Google this, because it's quite interesting to think that, as I said earlier, we're always talking on the show here about getting back to just the basic eating, where you're not trying to produce a gourmet meal every night for your family, but something that's good and wholesome and seasonal and healthy. And I think this medieval cooking's got something going for it. I hope you have a fantastic weekend this weekend. I'm sure there's going to be great food out there, and with 22,000 people attending, I think it's going to be one huge event.
Gabby, it's an enormous event. It's really good fun. There's all sorts of food there. Very modern food, very ancient food. I'm sure you could find a range in between. So it should be great.
Thanks for joining us this morning, Brad, and have a great weekend.
You too. Take care.
Bye
Bye-bye.
now. And we've been talking to Brad Gills, and isn't that amazing that, in this time where we're talking about 2012, there's people who have got this fantastic interest. Not only do they cook like that, but they dress like that, and they have crafts, and they play sport in that era. It's a fun thing to do. I think we're almost to the end of our time this morning. We've had some great guests this morning. We've been talking to Professor Ben Oldroyd about bees, and it is a subject that I will continue to bring up here, because I think it is something that we need to be conscious of. And of course, Keith Marsh is sharing the details of the Mount Me Fair coming up on the 14th of July. A good country fair. Go along, have a look, enjoy the mountain for a day, and of course, the Abbey tournaments and their fun time this weekend. Join in with those 22,000 people. It's almost as big as Farm, thinking of which is coming up in a few weeks. And of course we're going to be busy cooking out there. Our community kitchen's going to be at the farm for 3 days. We're going to have some fantastic exhibits, and next week we're going to be talking about that. So until next week, thanks for listening.